The guy to say, hey, I know you love your business, I know you're passionate about your business, I know you're working hard and you're trying to adjust and you're trying to improve the quality of your business, but your site is actually one of the most blocked sites in this Chrome extension. Like, that's really hard news to break to somebody. And when the other person really wants to convince you that it's high quality content, I think ultimately we came to an impasse at that meeting. And, for good reasons. He wanted to convince me it was high quality content. I was trying to break the news that even if he convinced me, it wouldn't make any difference. It's sort of like getting mad at a traffic cop whenever the government is shut down. Panda wasn't in the web spam team. It was actually in the larger quality team. The initial launch didn't come from web spam at all. So I was happy to try to explain all of this to Jason, but ultimately he was not happy with the outcome, and I can understand why he's frustrated. So content farms were a serious issue. We couldn't roll out changes slowly, and we really do not want to give partners special treatment. In fact, after that meeting with Jason, I pretty much decided I don't ever want to meet. And I didn't talk to Jason because he was a partner. I talked to him because he had a high-impact site. In some ways he'd said he was a search engine, and so I wanted to bend over backwards to try to give him information and give him context. But we've actually got a pretty good policy now. I have an internal website. Has anybody watched a YouTube video that I made? A few people. And everybody's like, I don't want to raise my hand. Leave me alone. We've also made a couple internal videos. So I made a 5-minute internal video when basically a salesperson comes to me and they say, hey, this person spends X million dollars a year, will you talk to them? Or, hey, this is a really valued partner. Or, this is a great client. I send them to this little mini website that we have inside Google that basically explains why we won't talk to them. Because we don't want to give special treatment to partners, advertisers, or clients. And that's basically just the way it works. So 6 months after Panda launched, in roughly 6 months, in June, there was a quote in the New York Times, "You can't mess with Google forever. Just a short time ago, the web seemed ungovernable. Bad content was driving out good. But Google asserted itself, and credit is due. Panda represents good cyber governance. It has allowed Google to send untrustworthy, repetitive, and unsatisfying content to the back of the class." So that's the kind of verdict that we have on Panda. We did have to launch it quickly. There was some collateral damage. We had to figure out how to iterate and improve. But ultimately, there was a fundamental disagreement between Jason and I about the quality of a particular site. And more importantly, there was a disagreement between Jason and the algorithm. And we have no exceptions to Panda. We have no exceptions whatsoever. So even if he had convinced me that Mahalo was the best site in the world, at best I could have gone to the engineers and said, can you try to find some signals that show that this is a good site? We did that analysis. We didn't find the data to support that. So I understand if Jason's angry. I understand if he's frustrated. He had a lot of people depending on him. He was under a lot of pressure. I get a lot of complaints. I get a lot of anger. I get a lot of frustration. And that's okay, right? It's all right if a black hat spammer wants to say, I want to punch Matt Cutts in the face. That's all right. What I have to do is look at what the other person's saying and look and see, is there a kernel of truth in there? Is there something that we need to do better? And I think there were things that we needed to do better. We've tried to improve our communication. We've tried to make things more scalable. We're sending out example URLs and messages so that people know what's exactly wrong if we've taken manual action. We've launched the manual action viewer, so you can actually see whether Google has put a manual web spam action on your site or if it's only algorithmic ranking. So there were a lot of things that we needed to improve, and I appreciated Jason's feedback. If he's still angry at me, then that's his call. But I think in every one of these encounters, whether it's Michael Gray calling us out, Aaron Wall calling us out, Jason Kalakanos calling us out, in every one of those instances, that's an opportunity for us to say, what's the kernel of truth behind what they're saying and what can we do better? And I think that we're doing better now than we did in 2011, and we'll do better in the future, but we have to keep working on it. So if you guys wanted a cage match, I'm sorry, but there's a couple well-meaning people who both are trying to do what they think is right.
So back to the Pubcon type questions. I spoke to a bunch of speakers. They kind of gave me a few questions they wanted to run by. We'll start with the first one and move to the audience. In July, Google updated the link scheme. You said there was a lot of changes, a lot of tactics that were used by many people in this room are no longer valid. Do we have to worry about old content that may violate some of that?
Yeah, so I think this question especially seems to apply to press releases. I was getting a lot of links from press releases, and then Google specifically called out press releases. So do I need to worry about that? Do I need to go back in time? It's kind of weird because people act like our guidelines change a lot, but the fundamental ideas behind our guidelines haven't changed that much. So people, for the most part, should know if you're paying for something, then you shouldn't get PageRank out of it. That's basically, you know, money under the table, it's payola. We don't want that sort of stuff to count. So if you were doing a press release and there's no keyword text, hey, great, you're just trying to convince a bunch of editors to write those articles. If you're doing a press release and you're like embedding, and you've certainly seen plenty of those kinds of press releases where they're throwing 3 or 4 keyword-rich articles or anchor text in there, then that is something to pay attention to. It's not that it's new. We've always had the principle if you're paying $100 or whatever for a press release, then that shouldn't count, that shouldn't flow PageRank, that shouldn't flow anchor text. We're just clarifying our existing principles in that regard. Now, especially with regard to press releases, what we've done is we've identified a lot of the top press release sites. And all we have to do is we say, okay, you know what? Maybe we don't trust links or anchors coming out of those sites. We don't count them as spam. We just say, just ignore those links. And that's okay, because the idea behind a press release is to convince someone to write about it. If you can get an editor or a reporter to take that seriously, that's fantastic. That's great. That newspaper article, hopefully it'll include a link, but at the least it increases awareness. But if you're worried about press releases, for the most part, we've already taken care of those. If you thought you were paying $100 and you were getting keyword-rich anchor text, what you were really getting is an article, a press release, and then you probably weren't getting that PageRank, you weren't getting that anchor text. So it's not that it would necessarily cause you a penalty. I wouldn't panic. But going forward, I would say if someone approaches you and they're like, hey, do you want to be in my directory? Well, it's $100, but I'll guarantee you whatever listing you want. Yes, you should be cautious about that. You should not do that. Hopefully that's relatively baked in as far as common sense by now. But.
Hi. Hi. More and more sites are using infinite scrolling. Can you address that?
Absolutely. So infinite scrolling is getting more common, and that's the sort of thing like JavaScript. It is tricky because it's almost like a calendar where you can say, okay, give me all the dates in 2012 and then 2013 and then 2014, and in theory, Googlebot could keep crawling all the way up to the year 10,000, and we'd never know when to stop. So you might want to think about building in some stuff. You might not want to have infinite scroll. You might want to have the scroll finish at some point. But Google is getting better at being able to access those links and say, okay, do those scroll events, that sort of thing. I wouldn't necessarily count on Google being able to, like if you're going to move the mouse or something like that and you have to wait until the scroll bar gets to the bottom of the page, that's the sort of thing where Googlebot might not be literally physically scrolling. So you probably do want to think about having some paginated kind of interface where people can still scroll through, if you can. We'll keep working on that because we want the web to be beautiful and modern and a seamless experience. But you still probably want to build in those safety guards because even if Googlebot does well, smaller search engines, DuckDuckGo, Blecko, whatever, they might not spend quite as much time on the page processing. So it's still probably a good idea to have the fallback and have those as static links somewhere on your site, at least for the sort of foreseeable future.
Matt.
Hey there.
I have two questions. The first one is for people who are trying to establish authority, how do they compete with people who have been around for a long time? And I'm looking for some new ideas. For example, with like usability, could they improve their product descriptions to help improve establish themselves? I'm thinking of local businesses and how they can compete with the larger ones, and perhaps they know their products a little bit better. Can they, enhance their product descriptions or captions naturally, and will Google notice that? Also, are ebooks like PDFs, do they contribute to authority? Okay.
Cool. Okay, so good questions. How can a small site build authority? And it is possible, but it's definitely a lot of elbow work, right? There's not a lot of shortcuts. But there are some really good best practices. It never hurts to go back to basics. Like some of the things that work really well are having a blog or having a forum, having that unique content, having something that's, if your business model is, I'm going to grab an affiliate feed, I'm going to just slap that affiliate feed up on the web, or I'm going to spin it with a thesaurus, and I'm just going to slap that up on the web. That is not the sort of thing that stands the test of time. But if you're writing unique descriptions, if you make them a little bit more catchy, a little bit more compelling, something like that, that can be a great way to work. Anything that's creative, right? If you think about what were the last 5 things you shared on Facebook or Twitter, they're probably something creative. If it's a video, it's fun, it's coming at it from a different angle. So I'd say a combination of back to the basics, things like a blog, things like a forum, you know, reaching out to the local newspaper, all that sort of, you know, just straight, normal, vanilla, gotta put in the time kind of stuff. And then at the same time, think about what is the creative thing. Somebody was like, plumbing, how are you gonna make plumbing interesting? You know what, there are probably a ton of plumbing stories, right? I had to get my, the pipes in our house snaked out recently, and I spent the whole afternoon with the plumber, and he kept me laughing the whole time, right? He was like, oh, you wouldn't believe this one guy. Oh man, it was like, the whole afternoon passed in like the blink of an eye. And if that was on a blog, I would like totally read that. It's no longer on the web that I can find, but there was an adult video store clerk who would write about her experience of being in an adult video store. And like, I spent an entire, you know, night just reading, like, you know, I'm not especially interested in adult video stores, but I was interested in her stories. So those kinds of things, developing a personality, developing a voice, all that stuff works really, really well. The other question is about citations or mentions in PDFs or text. We tend to be a little bit more skeptical of that. And the reason is, I don't know if you guys know this, but there are some spammers in the world. And the spammers, they'll use these automated packages, you know, Xrumor, Scrapebox, whatever, you know, and they just say, I'm going to make thousands and thousands of blog comments. And if you'll notice, they do it very opportunistically. They're going to sign it with HTML, they're going to sign it with BB code, they're going to sign these links in all these different formats, and then they'll also just throw in like a plain text, you know, hyperlink. So that's why I worry about things like citations, because you would see a lot of spammers who are like, I'm just going to leave a PDF lying around all over the place with all my URLs. And we've seen that. We've seen spam ebooks on Amazon where they're just like automatically generated and actually have spam links in them. So I'm not going to take that off the table as a signal. Other than you can't buy ads and it won't help your ranking, we pretty much try to leave ourselves an open area as far as potential ranking signals. But I would be a little skeptical about that because I'd worry about the spam implications.
And the second one was related to the blog things. I heard some sort of rumor that there's a limit to how often you can blog. Is there any truth to that?
I would blog as often as you want to and you reasonably can. There are some sites that have very high volume. The Verge, Engadget, you know, some sites that basically like you come back and there's a whole new set of, you know, Huffington Post, this sort of stuff. But that's usually because they have a lot of writers, or they have a lot of contributors, stuff like that. I wouldn't overdo it. You know, I actually have less than 1,000 blogs on my website, right? So in, 8 years of blogging, I've written less than 1,000 articles, right? So it's really more about what are the right articles. I have one article that's like, why Google won't remove that page you don't like. And everyone who ever writes in and says, oh, I don't like this algorithm, or I want this page to go away, I can send them to that one article. So oftentimes quality over quantity actually will prevail.
Time for one more question right over here. Paul.
Hey Matt, my name is Paul from Promoter. A nice talk. I would like to ask one specific question. You guys did a great job with the Google algorithms, and that basically helps a lot of our clients to educate, and they basically respect a lot more what we do.